If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to. I wasn't even supposed to be home that afternoon. It was a Sunday. Quiet, overcast. The kind of day where everything feels a little slower. My husband and his parents had gone out for some kind of church event. I honestly don't even remember what it was. I just remember deciding to stay behind. I had exams coming up and needed the quiet. And if I'm being honest, I also just wanted a few hours to myself. No noise, no talking, no obligations. I made a cup of coffee, opened up my laptop, skimmed through some notes, and then, like clockwork, I got bored and started browsing for something to watch. A horror movie, ironically. I don't even remember which one I picked. It was just background noise while I reviewed some material. But halfway through, I realized I was hungry. Not just snack hungry. Like, I need something salty, right now kind of hungry. I remembered there was a frozen bag of fries in the freezer. So I checked. But of course, it was gone. Empty. I must have finished it earlier that week and forgot. Still craving fries, I went for the next best thing. Real potatoes. I started peeling and slicing them by hand in the kitchen. Nothing fancy. Just me, a knife, a cutting board, and a little olive oil. The movie was still playing in the living room behind me, just barely loud enough for me to hear the dialogue. And that's when I heard it. The metallic creak of the front gate opening. It's a very distinct sound. Our gate always makes that same groaning noise when someone pushes it open, especially if they don't lift it slightly while doing it. I didn't jump or feel scared. My first thought was just, oh, they're back early. My husband, maybe. I even paused for a second to listen, expecting the front door to open next. But it didn't. Still, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was taking something out of the car or checking something outside. I just went back to slicing the potatoes. A couple of seconds passed. Then I felt something. Not heard. Felt. You know that sensation when someone walks into a room and you haven't seen them yet, but you know they're there? Like the air changes a little? That tiny pressure shift. That's what it was. A sudden, undeniable awareness that someone was standing right behind me. And the weirdest part? I didn't panic. I smiled. Because sometimes, when my husband comes home and sees me cooking, he sneaks up behind me and gives me one of those quiet, behind-the-back hugs. No words, just arms around the waist and a kiss on the neck. So I waited for it. That hug. I stood there, pretending I didn't know, still cutting potatoes and trying not to grin. But nothing happened. No arms. No kiss. Just silence. I turned my head slightly, expecting to catch him in the act. Maybe he was about to jump scare me or something. But when I turned fully, there was no one there. No one. The hallway was empty. The kitchen was empty. The living room, still playing that half-forgotten horror movie, was empty. I stood there frozen for a few seconds, trying to process the absence of someone I was so sure had been right behind me. My body still felt like it had been touched, like the warmth of another person had just faded away. I even reached behind me and touched the back of my own shirt, like I was trying to prove to myself it was still real. I wasn't cold. I wasn't hallucinating. I was just still. That's when I noticed the air had shifted again. It wasn't temperature. It was pressure. The weight in the room had changed, like the atmosphere itself had thickened. And I remembered thinking, this isn't new. Because the truth is, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I've always been a little sensitive. Superstitious, maybe. I don't talk about it much, but there have been moments in my life where I've felt things. Presences, shadows, energy shifts, whatever you want to call them. Things I couldn't explain. Growing up, I used to hear whispers when no one else was home. My grandmother's old house had cold spots that didn't make sense. And once, when I was in high school, I saw someone walk past my bedroom door, clear as day, only to find out that everyone else was asleep or out of the house. So yeah, I believe in that kind of thing. But this was different. This was here. Now. In my home. I tried to brush it off. Told myself it was my nerves. Or maybe the movie had messed with my head. But deep down I knew. That presence hadn't been imagined. I had felt it. My body had reacted to it. I decided to shake it off and just finish cooking. I turned back to the counter and went to light the stove. But as I bent down to grab a lighter from the drawer, something caught my eye. We have a decorative mirror hanging at the end of the hallway. It's one of those long, narrow ones with a dark wood frame, mostly for aesthetic. As I looked up, just for a split second, I saw movement in that mirror. Not a reflection. Movement, like something had darted across the hallway just outside the mirror's field of view. Fast, shadowy, almost like it didn't want to be seen but slipped up just long enough to be caught. I stood straight and stared. The hallway was empty again. Silent. I didn't go look. I didn't call out. I didn't even move for a good 30 seconds. I just stood there, listening, waiting for something, anything, to explain what I had seen. But it never came. Instead, I lit the stove, threw the sliced potatoes and some oil, and kept my eyes on the pan like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. I didn't look back down the hallway. I didn't check the mirror again. The movie kept playing behind me, but I couldn't focus on it. All I could think about was that weight in the room, that invisible pressure I couldn't shake. It clung to me, followed me from room to room. The fries sizzled. I added salt, tried to act like everything was fine, like I hadn't just experienced something I couldn't explain. I wanted to believe that when my husband walked through the door a few minutes later, everything would snap back to normal. But it didn't. When he finally did get home, I didn't tell him right away. I didn't want to scare him, or worse, have him laugh it off. I needed time to process it myself. Days went by, then weeks. Nothing happened again exactly, but I never quite felt alone after that day. Even in the middle of the night, with all the lights off and the house still, I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder, listening for that gate, that creak, that breath that wasn't mine. I don't know what it was. I don't know if something followed me, or if it had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to make itself known. All I know is, I still remember the exact feeling of that presence behind me, and I've never quite felt safe in that kitchen ever again. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond. I've had weird dreams before, like anyone else, but this one, it hasn't let go of me. I still think about it in the shower, while I'm brushing my teeth, even when I'm walking through my apartment at night with the lights off. It was just a dream, I tell myself. I keep saying it, but I don't really believe it anymore. It started like any other dream. Random, kind of blurry around the edges, but oddly peaceful. I was in what looked like a university, though not one I recognized. It felt familiar, like a place I'd seen in a memory, but couldn't quite place. I wasn't a student. It was more like a retreat, or maybe some kind of seminar. People were gathered around. Some I recognized vaguely. Others I knew I'd never met. Everyone seemed to know me, though. There were moments that stood out. I remember someone mentioning that we were attending a religious event, but nothing really spiritual was happening. Then I saw a famous person, someone from TV, and they waved at me like we were old friends. I laughed, even in the dream. It didn't make sense. None of it did, but it didn't feel threatening. Not yet. At one point, I looked down and noticed I was wearing an old wristband, the kind you'd use for tennis or gym class. It had a small symbol on it that I swore I'd seen before, though I couldn't remember where. The dream kept shifting, like someone flipping through channels, but staying on the same show. One moment I was outside, the next in a hallway that led to a classroom. There was this background hum, almost like music or static, but I didn't question it. And then I dropped my phone. I remember that part clearly. I was walking through the hallway when it slipped from my hand and hit the floor. Someone behind me picked it up before I could even turn around. It was a guy about my age, maybe a little younger. He handed it to me and said casually, like we'd spoken before, "You dropped this, Joao." I blinked. I didn't know him at all, but I took the phone, thanked him, and moved on. A few minutes later, or maybe hours, time made no sense in that place. I dropped the phone again. Same hallway, same feeling, and he appeared again. "Careful," he said. "You really should stop dropping it." His name was Guy Voles. I didn't ask. He just told me. Guy Voles. He looked at my wristband and added, "Maybe it's the band. Could be making you forgetful." Then he smiled and turned away. Something about that smile felt wrong. Not evil, just off, like he knew something I didn't. I kept walking. The dream changed again. I was sitting in a classroom that looked like it was built inside another room. No windows, just a massive wall of glass looking out at some kind of storm. Dark clouds boiling in slow motion. There were other people in the room, watching the storm too. But they weren't speaking, just staring. Out of nowhere, someone behind me shouted, "Donnie Darko." I turned startled, but no one acknowledged it. They just kept staring. That's when it hit me. I was dreaming, like really dreaming. I was aware of it, but instead of waking up, I told myself I'd look up Guy Voles when I got home. That's how vivid it all felt. I didn't want to lose the name. It felt important. The classroom faded. Suddenly I was in my bedroom, not the one I live in now. It was smaller, felt like the one I had as a teenager. The kind with heavy curtains, a wooden desk, and a single bed pushed against the wall. I lay back, phone in hand, trying to open Instagram, but it wouldn't load. Instead, a video started playing. At first, it was just colors, blue and yellow waves rippling across the screen. A calm voice spoke over them, like one of those sensory meditation videos. But then the voice changed. It got deeper, slower, like something was wrong with the tape. Then came the static, not just on the screen. I heard it in my ears, loud, crackling. It grew until I winced and tried to mute it. That's when I heard the whisper, not from the phone, from right beside me. "Joao, are you sleepy?" It wasn't a question. It was a warning. My heart stopped. I couldn't move. I was in that horrible place between sleep and waking where you know your body isn't listening. My eyes opened, or I thought they did, and I felt the mattress shift. Something was lying next to me, not touching me, but close. Close enough that I could hear it breathing. I turned my head, painfully slow, and I saw it. It was a man, at least. I think it was a man, wearing a massive bear costume. Not cute, not cartoony. The fur was matted, dark and heavy, and the face of the bear was grotesque. It had exaggerated features, like someone had taken a child's toy and twisted it into something awful. Its mouth was stuck in a wide, stiff grin, showing teeth that didn't belong in a costume. But it wasn't moving. It was just breathing, deep, slow breaths, in and out, loud enough to drown out everything else. I couldn't scream. I couldn't blink. I just stared, waiting for it to attack me. But it never did. It just lay there, breathing, watching. And the worst part, I couldn't tell if it was asleep or waiting. I don't know how long I stayed frozen. Eventually, I forced my eyes shut and told myself it wasn't real, that none of this was real. When I opened them again, the bed was empty. I was alone, but I wasn't okay. I sat up, drenched in sweat. My bedroom was dark, completely dark, but I could still hear the static, faint now like a memory. I turned to the side, toward the wall where a row of glossy tiles ran up beside my bed. A weird design choice left over from the apartment's last renovation. They reflected just enough light to show shapes in the dark. That's when I saw him again. In the reflection, standing. The bear man wasn't on the bed anymore. He was behind me. His face was expressionless, that same cruel smile carved into the costume. But he didn't move, just watched. And then he was gone. Not like he walked away. One blink, and the reflection was empty. Since that night, I haven't dreamed the same way. I keep hearing things when I sleep. Static, whispers. I've had moments where I look into mirrors and see a shadow in the corner of the glass. Sometimes I'll wake up thinking someone's next to me, only to find nothing but silence. I did try to look up Guay Voles. I even typed the name into every platform I use. Nothing. Not a single result. It's like the name was created just for me. Just for that dream. But sometimes I wonder if I didn't dream at all. Sometimes, late at night, I lie in bed and try to convince myself it was just a nightmare. That the breathing I heard wasn't real. That the bear man wasn't watching me. But no matter how hard I try to forget, I can still hear it. That deep, rhythmic breathing, right beside me. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to be. It was a stormy night. One of those heavy, oppressive storms that make the world outside feel like it's shutting down. My grandmother lives deep in the countryside of Minas Gerais, far from any town, where the silence is so thick, it feels like the air itself is watching you. That night, the rain came down in torrents, relentless and deafening, and the moon was hidden behind thick clouds. The only light that pierced the darkness came from occasional lightning, flickering briefly and casting eerie shadows across the landscape. I remember it was around 9 p.m. when my grandmother suddenly sat up in bed, her eyes fixed on the window. She said she thought she saw someone standing out there in the darkness, a shadowy figure barely visible through the trees. At first, she thought it might just be a trick of the light, or maybe the branches of the nearby trees, swaying in the wind. But there was something about it that didn't sit right. She called my grandfather, and without saying a word, he grabbed his rifle and stood by the window, peering out into the night. He was still for what seemed like an eternity, trying to make sense of the shape in the darkness. After a while, he shook his head and said it was probably nothing, just the wind or the rain playing tricks on their eyes. But even though he said it was nothing, that unsettling feeling lingered in the air. We tried to sleep, but the tension never really left. I remember lying in bed, my heart thudding in my chest as the wind howled outside. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't explain why. Later, around midnight, the silence was shattered by the frantic barking of the dog outside. It wasn't just a normal bark, it was sharp, aggressive, and full of fear. The barking went on for a minute or two, getting more frantic with every passing second. And then, suddenly, there was a horrible yelp of pain. The barking stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed was the worst part. It wasn't the peaceful silence of the storm, but a heavy, suffocating silence that felt like it was pressing in on us. My grandmother was the first to sit up again. Her face was pale, and she seemed to be listening to something I couldn't hear. My grandfather stood up, rifle in hand, and motioned for me to stay quiet. He moved toward the door, his eyes scanning the shadows as if waiting for something, though I couldn't imagine what. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next sound, the next movement. And then we heard it. A knock. 3 sharp raps on the door, loud enough to make us all freeze. The knock came again, exactly the same, spaced out just long enough to let us know whoever or whatever was on the other side wanted to be heard. My grandfather, ever the calm one, moved toward the door, his hand steady on the rifle. He didn't say anything, but the way he moved, the tension in his every step, told me everything I needed to know. We were not alone. My grandfather stood behind the door, his eyes narrowed in the darkness. I could feel the fear radiating off of him, but he didn't show it. He stood there, listening, Waiting. After what felt like an eternity, the knock came again. 3 raps, then silence. We didn't move. None of us spoke. We could hear our own breaths, the sound of the rain outside, the occasional creak of the house settling. But there was nothing else. No movement, no sound from the other side of the door. And then the voice came. Soft at first, a whisper that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was wrong. It was too cold, too distant, like it didn't belong to a human being. My grandfather's face hardened, and he lifted the rifle just slightly, aiming toward the door, ready for whatever was about to happen. He called out in a low voice, his words sharp with fear and defiance. "Koisaruim, o que você está correndo?" Bad thing. What do you want? For what seemed like forever, there was nothing. No answer, no movement. The silence was suffocating. Then, just when I thought the tension might break, the voice came again, barely audible, a soft whisper that seemed to wrap around us like a cold wind. I couldn't understand the words, but they carried a weight that made my stomach churn. The voice was not human. That much was clear. It wasn't angry, but it wasn't kind either. It was something else, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. My grandfather stood there, unmoving, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the door. My grandmother was huddled in the bedroom, clutching her rosary, whispering prayers under her breath. The rest of us were too scared to move. We waited, and in that moment of quiet, I could feel the presence on the other side of the door. It was watching us, waiting. The voice came once more, but this time it was different. It was closer, as if the speaker had moved nearer to the door, yet I still couldn't see anything through the cracks. It whispered something so faint, so chilling, that I couldn't bear to hear it. My heart was racing, my skin crawling with every second that passed. Then, there was nothing. Absolute silence. The kind of silence that makes you question whether your own breathing is too loud. We stood there, in the dark, the storm outside still raging. My grandfather's grip on the rifle loosened slightly, and he slowly stepped away from the door, his face pale, his body stiff with tension. What had just happened? Who or what had been knocking on that door? We never got an answer, and I'm not sure we ever will. The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence. No more knocks, no more voices. We didn't sleep. We couldn't. The terror of that moment hung in the air like a dark cloud, a constant weight that wouldn't let us rest. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. The dog never came back, and we never saw anyone. But sometimes, when I visit my grandmother, I can feel it. The same weight in the air, the same sense that something is watching. I try not to think about it too much, but I can't help it. Whatever was out there that night, it was something else, something beyond our understanding. And it's still out there, waiting, watching. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Fear and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here, you'll find more real stories filled with mystery, psychological horror, and the supernatural every week. Before you go, make sure to check out the 2 videos that just popped up in the end screen. I promise, they'll leave you with goosebumps. See you next time, if you dare.